Anchikiwa. Hello, how are you all? Welcome to Homelands. Originally broadcast on CFCR 90.5 FM in Saskatoon, Homelands of the Métis and Treaty 6 territory. This is your favorite auntie, Andrea Leding-Dishnikashu. My name is Andrea. Call me Auntie Andy if you like, and I'll be your host over this next hour. We are joined again by wonderful Jess Iron, who was here with us on our last episode. We talked about July being BIPOC Mental Health Month and healing. And we just talked about, healing in general, healing as an individual, healing collectively, healing nation to nation, and kind of all of unpacking some of that. And you can find that episode on YouTube. Just Google Homelands and Jessica Iron. You'll see a mention of her podcast, Philanthropy. Uh, Not philosophy. I tried to rename it last episode, but philanthropy, which you can find it on Apple Music and Spotify and YouTube. And she unpacks kind of healing modalities as well. She's a yogi. She's from Canoe Lake. She's the wonderful mother of three. She's the principal at a kayak. Is that okay to mention?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And she's doing her PhD in education, her dissertation. She's working on that. And yeah, welcome, Jess. So take it away, whatever you'd like to talk about today.
Oh, thank you. As always, it's great to be here, and this would now be our third episode together in this series. And so in the first episode, we had talked a little bit about what does healing mean as an individual and making sure that we understand that healing is not about fixing something that's broken, that it's about reconnecting to ourselves, remembering who we are as Indigenous people, and reconnecting to Creator in that sense. If you follow that path, but even reconnecting to yourself, I think some people have a different relationship with Creator and maybe don't have a relationship with Creator. Um, but nevertheless, if you do have a relationship, it helps the healing to go a little bit faster, I think. And then also on the last episode, we talked about healing our relationships because it is important to work on that relationship with ourself and with Creator, but also with others around us, because that's where a lot of our spiritual growth will happen. And that's how we improve relationships in the nation, right? Nation to nation. And this episode, I was hoping for us to talk a little bit more about spirituality and the role in healing. And I think, again, I just mentioned it that when we have that relationship with Creator, that it makes the journey a little bit easier because then we recognize that there's a greater source of power around us and within us, and it connects all of us. And so, what spirituality looks like can be different for other people. It can be different according to your whatever faith you believe in, how you pray. And I'm not here to comment on anybody's way of how they pray. But if you recognize that there's a source greater than us, that unites us, then I think, that's a good place for most of us to be. And for myself, as a yogi and as a Cree lady, Creator is everything, and I say it all the time. I've said it on my own podcast that my relationship with Creator is the most important thing to me in this world. It's more important to me than any relationship I have because this is the source that makes all things possible, that makes all of my relationships possible. I can't even say my kids are the most important because they come from Creator. And so I recognize that they come from Creator and, they'll go back to Creator whenever He decides. And so I understand that. And then also, I sit there and I think about how, even with my partner, like, that my partner is not my closest relationship in this world because, well, I've had a few partners. I've been divorced a couple times. And so, I know that sometimes it doesn't work, no matter how much you try to have those relationships with somebody, sometimes a marriage breaks. And so I'm okay with that, because I've learned lessons from those relationships ending. And now I also know that, the most important relationship in the universe to me is always with Creator. And that's where I always start and end my day. And throughout the day, I know for myself, I try to focus on that relationship, that I'm honoring that relationship in everything that I say or do. And I recognize that those times when I'm not my best self, that those are usually the times where I've forgotten Creator and I think about myself and I put myself first. And and then sometimes I have to make things better as a result because I haven't been walking in a good way. Maybe I've said something, that has created harm or done something. And usually those are the times when I've been disconnected and I've put my ego first. And so I've had to learn that, especially as a yogi, I've been very blessed in that sense. Well, in two ways, actually, because in the yogi world, we really focus a lot on ego and, the devastation that ego can bring to our worlds. But to also understand, too, that it does play a role, that, we do have a reason for having an ego. And if you have no ego, maybe you won't wake up in the morning and do anything because you think you're nothing. And so it's important to have a bit of an ego, but not much, to understand the role that it has and to understand how it can impact us in our relationships when we think too much about ourselves. But then also for Cree culture, of course I was raised in ceremony, and it's a very humble culture. And that's true for many Indigenous nations. I can't speak for all of them because I don't know about all of them, but I would imagine it's the same pretty much across the board. That, the role of the individual was to support community. It was never to, become more powerful or, to become more important. It was always to sustain your community and understand the role that we all play in maintaining that connection to nature and keeping nature healthy and thriving, that we were the stewards of the land. And so we definitely had to play a role together. And even now, when you think about it, the power that we have collectively is so much greater all of the time than the power we hold by ourselves. And I know for myself, even as an educator, as a principal, that that's true when I think of my schools and I think of my staff. For me to come into my school and say, oh, we need to do this, we need to do that, and order everybody around. Well, nobody likes to be ordered around. And so then I might have a lot of resistance. But when I work with my team and we work together as a group, then the amazing things that I've seen happen in schools, it's a result of all of the people who are working together. It's never because I said this or I did this or anything like that. It's always about, what we did together as a group. And so I think, you know, for us as individuals, and that's why I do my podcast, Philanthropy, because it is to help all of us to heal. I've recognized as a leader the role that healing plays in our wanting to help our community and improving that, service in our community. When people are feeling drained and tired and exhausted, it's because they're usually depleted in some way, shape, or form. When we think about the medicine wheel and we think about mind, body, spirit, emotion, sometimes people, and we all know these people, and they give so much, but sometimes they're so exhausted and they're so tired and they feel frustrated and burnt out uh, because they're very generous, but they're giving from an empty cup. And so, what I wanted to explore with philanthropy was how do we take care of ourselves so that we can take care of the world in a better way and each other, right? Not just ourselves, but everybody else. And so that's what I wanted to explore, and that's what a lot of the topics are about. Is about promoting that healing. And again, it's that relationship within ourselves with Creator so that we can give back to others around us and to the greater world. And so, yeah, those are some of my initial thoughts. I don't know what your thoughts are, Andrea.
Oh, I love that so much. Yeah, it is about it's about all that, right? It's about, filling our own cups, right? So that we can, everybody always says to me, remember the oxygen mask. You have to put your own oxygen mask on before you put everybody else's on. And yeah, you're no good if you're unconscious, right? So um to go back to that airplane analogy, but the full cup, right? It's the same thing, right? That you want to give from that full cup. You got to find those things that bring you joy and fill you up and heal you, and then you can go out and heal the world with kind of that abundance mindset rather than that scarcity mindset where you're running yourself into the ground and you're and I've been guilty of that too, where I just kind of you know, it just feels like you're treading water instead of swimming, and so, yeah, I think that's really important, really important. Yeah, keep going where you're going. It's great.
Awesome. How much time do we have?
We're about 12 minutes in, so we're almost at the
Okay.
halfway mark. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. So, as I was talking about that path of spirituality and how can spirituality help us to promote healing? Well, we explored it a little bit last time and how, or even in the first episode, pardon me, where having that connection to Creator and having that healing um, process can look really different for every person, right? For some people, it might be through exploring artistic pursuits. Maybe you bead or sew or paint or write. And sometimes, I know for myself, I used to do a workshop and I still do it sometimes, a journaling workshop. And it's a healing workshop because it really, what happens is the more that we write, the more that we're able to connect to our true self. And that's just only one way, because that's true in many ways. It could be through painting or through beading or whatever. How we're expressing ourselves um, takes us to a vulnerable place. And when we start shedding all of those layers, those superficial layers or layers of things that stress us out, and we get to the core of ourselves, because that's what an artistic path will do. It will take us to the core of ourself. And when we're able to access our most vulnerable, intimate sides, that's where we're at our most raw and we're most connected to Creator, and Creator is able to tap into us. And so then that can be true through, many different modalities. It doesn't even have to be an artistic pursuit. That can happen in ceremony, when you're, in ceremony and you're shedding away all of the fears and the stresses and worries and all of the things that are burdening you. And when you break it down and you get to the core, once again, that's where that healing process happens because now Creator can access you, and so it can be an unpleasant journey because when we think of things like traumas and intergenerational traumas and lateral violence and a lot of the garbage that we see in the world, not even just in Indigenous communities, but in communities all over. And we've explored that a little bit earlier in one of the earlier episodes, that many nations have experienced pain as a result of colonization, and and that's true in all of the BIPOC communities. But even for non-Indigenous communities, white communities, there's been a lot of pain, and there's addictions and all kinds of things that have happened. And so when we really start to strip away and get to that core self, and that's where that healing process begins. And that sometimes I know I've said that before, but we interrupt that process with addictions. And a lot of people do that deliberately, right? Because what happens in order for that healing, that reconnecting, that remembering to happen, we have to go through the crap. We have to wade in the crap and, muck about in there. And I don't want to say sit in our crap, because you can. Sometimes people do, and they stay stuck there in a victim mentality. And I know these people, and they get stuck to that narrative. They get stuck to, why me, why is creator doing this to me? And again, now if you start looking at the world that way, it's because you're stuck in yourself, and you're forgetting that everybody has crap at some point, and we have to learn how to navigate. um Sorry, my dog is making some weird sounds. We have to learn how to navigate through that stuff in order for that healing process to happen. So you can't get stuck in that victim mentality. That's on the journey, but that's stopping. Being in a victim mindset means, yes, that's true. Maybe a lot of those things that have happened to you are probably true. But you're also only seeing one side of things, that there's a bigger, greater story. And when you're able to process the hurts and let go of some of those angers, because that's not to say that it was just if something horrible happened to you. That's not to say, it was something that, creator wanted for you. But to understand that, what, if we don't have crap happen in our lives, then people often won't reach out to creator. If you think about the people out there who are living their best life and they're so joyful and always happy, and everything goes well for them, oftentimes that becomes a very hedonistic place where you're stuck in a pleasure mindset, and you forget that there's a world beyond yourself where there's a lot of pain and suffering, and people who could benefit from, your support. And, now you're stuck in all the joys of this world, and you forget your role in creation. And all of us have a role to play. You have a purpose. And creator has given all of us a purpose. He's given us a purpose and specific gifts and talents. And it's our duty to find what those gifts and talents are so that we can help the world, so we can help people around us, and we can help the community, in the greater world, the natural world. And so it is a journey, but we can't get stuck in the victim mindset. We have to continue, and we have to connect so that we can discover all of these gifts, so that we can do that proper healing, and so that we can be of benefit to mankind. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Andrea.
Oh, I just think that's beautiful. Like it's so true, right? Like so many people get wrapped up. I was at an organization where I was, granting grants to various artists, and sometimes people are so wrapped up in their project that they're not looking at the bigger picture of what does this do for the community, what does this do for the world, and it always sung to my heart when people were kind of thinking about that big picture. Hey, this is what I have to contribute. I mean, not that all artists aren't contributing at some level, but when you use your arts to advocate, it's so powerful, right? Because you whether you're lifting up voices that haven't been heard, or you're working with youth, or there's so many great projects that can happen where you're kind of using the gifts that you have and the natural bent that you have and the abilities that creator's given you, and you're giving back, right? And that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to share, right? Not just share the land, but share our gifts, share our worldview, our experiences, and our talents, and help other people with that, and make the world a better place, right? Leave it better than you found it. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's I love kind of, you know where you're going with that. So we've got about like 7 minutes left. So if you kind of want to just I mean, sorry, till the break.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you have any other thoughts that you kind of want to close before the next break and the commercials, you're listening to Jess Iron on Homelands, CFCR 90.5 FM.
All right. Well, thanks, Andrea. But I fully believe that. And I know for myself that the only way that I was able to tap into a lot of these thoughts is, through Creator. And I always say that, if I ever say anything amazing, it's probably Creator. If I say anything dumb, it's probably me. So, but I really do truly believe, because that's my first and foremost relationship in this world is with Creator. And so I try to tune in all of the time, as often as possible. I try to keep myself in a prayer mentality as often as I can, which is not easy in this world. There's a lot of distractions, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of suffering, and it's easy to get pulled off course. And so, it's a never ending challenge for me to, return to that focused mindset. But that's where the aid of ceremony comes in, and ceremony itself, in my culture, different ceremonies, whatever I can. When I have any opportunity to pray, I'm at my happiest, because then I know I'm connecting to Creator. And of course, for yoga, I'm so blessed because I was taught meditation, and meditation was a tool that helped me to connect to myself and to connect to Creator. And so I use both of those all of the time. And I have found that, the more that I meditate, and it's been, I don't know how many years it's been now. I'm going to say about maybe 17 or 18 years that I've been meditating. And I've really seen huge transformation in my own self, in my own growth as a result. I've definitely have a lot less anger. I'm so much more forgiving and patient and kinder and loving, and all of the things that I would want to see in other people. I've tried to do those myself, because at the end of the day, we've talked about that a little bit on another episode, that um, people are on their own journeys. They may or may not meet you on that journey. But at the end of the day, all we can control is ourselves. And so for myself, that's understanding that nobody benefits from my garbage. So I have to clean up my own garbage as much as possible, because I try to be somebody that is easier to be around, where people are grateful for my company and not loathing my existence. Not to say that doesn't still happen. I'm sure there are some people that I rub the wrong way still, even through all of my earnest intentions and goodwill. You know what? And I recognize too that sometimes that's because people are on their own journeys. And even if you're trying so hard and you're doing everything you can to be a good person, sometimes people will not like you. And you have to understand that, you know what? That's on them. That's their crap. right? And and I recognize that there's a lot of jealousy in this world too, and that comes from people who don't know how to get where you are. They don't know how to do what you've done, and that's where our purpose comes in, where we are trying our best to support the world through our talents and our purpose. And if we can, we show people what we've done. We explain to them what we've done. That's what Buddha did. He figured out the way, through suffering, to go beyond suffering into a place of enlightenment. And so he told people how to do it. The same with Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ knew, through his own sacrifice and through forgiveness, and he showed people a path. And so I think it's our duty as humans too, that, even if we never reach, the heights of Jesus or Buddha, that, we always show the way, that we got somewhere. And so for myself, that's what I do with philanthropy on my podcast, is to be, sharing any tips or tricks or tools or strategies or anything that will help people with their own growth and their own spiritual development. Because I think, this world can be a really amazing place. And if we're able to tap into our best selves and become our best selves, then everybody benefits, not just us, but everybody around us in the world.
That's perfect. And that's a perfect note to end on. So we'll take our brief commercial break and we'll be right back to talk more about that with Jess Iron. So don't change that dial.